Jennifer's Diary by Anne Fine. Read by Sophie Ward. Chapter 1. Iolanthe? What? What are you doing? I'm writing, aren't I? You can see I am. Here's the paper in front of me. This is the pen in my hand. Jennifer sighed. I know you're writing, Iolanthe. I just want to know what you're writing. Why? Because it might give me an idea. That's the trouble with Jennifer. No ideas. 2 legs, 2 arms, a pretty face, but no imagination. None at all. I'm writing a story about a sheep called Hector, who suddenly realized he's going to be eaten. Jennifer peered over my shoulder and read aloud. And so I lay forlornly in my sheep pen, reflecting on the sad fate of all who had lain there before me. That's very good. Yes, I said, that's why I want to get on with it. She sighed again. I can't think of anything to write. She never can. I haven't even started. Surprise, surprise. You think of something for me. Jennifer! She shut up for a bit. I carried on, through Hector's desperate dawn escape, his daring capture of the farmer and his wife, the barbecue, and then the visit from the farm inspector. And how are Mr. and Mrs. Cruel? Excellent, said Hector. Very, very tasty. I think the ducklings got the sauce just right. Now Jennifer was leaning over my arm again. Have the animals eaten them? Yes, of course. She seemed amazed. How did you think of that? I just did. I don't know how you do it, she said crossly. Miss Hardy says, write a story, and I sit here and can't think of a single word to write. You just pick up your pen and out it pours. Sensitive sheep, cruel farmers, cannibal cows, and I can't think of anything. It's not fair. There must be something between Jennifer's ears. She can do maths and learn poems and even play the piano. But every time I hear that old wail of hers, I can't think of anything to write. I want to tape her mouth shut, or fine her 50 pence, or move and sit by Sarah, or complain to Miss Hardy, or change schools, or slice off the top of Jennifer's head and fill her brain up to overflowing with some of my leftover ideas. I have too many of them. That's my trouble. Chapter 2. When we were getting ready to go home, I found a rainbow-coloured book on the floor. I picked it up and asked Jennifer, Did this fall out of your pocket? She put her hand out for it. Oh, thank you, Iolanthe. I turned the pretty book over. What is it? Is it new? It's a present, she said. A diary from my Aunt Muriel. Every single day of the year has a whole glossy blank page to itself, so you can write in it. And what have you put in it so far? Nothing much, she admitted. I opened it at the first page. Jan 1st. It was quite cold today. I turned the page. January 2nd was still blank, and so was January 3rd. But on January 4th, she'd spilled out all her secrets. Mum and I went to the shops. So what did you buy? I asked her on January 4th. She stared at me. I can't remember. You should have put it in the diary, I said. That's what it's for. She snatched it back. You know I'm no good at writing. That's ideas for Miss Hardy, I said. But this is a diary. You didn't have to make things up. You could have just written down what happened. Not much did. Then you could have written something else in it, I said, like inner thoughts. She looked as blank as January 2nd. Inner thoughts? You know, I said, things like unspoken fears, private worries, secret hopes. Everyone has those. Jennifer gave me a funny look, as if to say, maybe you do, Iolanthe, but I don't. Then she went off to walk home with Sarah. I go the other way, so when I saw the diary on the ground again, just outside school, instead of chasing after the two of them to give it back, I picked it up and took it home with me. Diaries are deeply private. I know that. So it sat on the table while I was having tea, and I didn't even touch it. It sat on the arm of the sofa while I was watching telly. I didn't even peep inside. And it sat on the laundry basket while I was having my bath. I didn't even nose through the pages looking for good bits I'd missed. I didn't crack until bedtime. Then I read all the bits I'd read before while Jennifer was watching. Jan 1st, it was quite cold today. Blank, blank, Jan 4th, Mum and I went to the shops. The next 2 pages were just 2 more blanks. Then, Jan 7th, nothing much happened. And that was that. I'm serious. I turned over every page and there was no more, not a single word. And it's the 11th today. Sad life. Chapter 3. I only wrote in it because it was there. I wasn't being spiteful. It's just that I was tucked up in my bed, not at all tired, with nothing else to do. My pen was practically waving at me out of my school bag, and the next page in the diary was so smooth and white and empty, it seemed to be begging for help. Help! Help! The words still ring in my ears. Help! Help! Today, January 11th, I saved a little boy's life. I'm not that brave. In fact, Iolanthe, who sits next to me in class, often says I'm a wimp. But when I saw that poor child drowning in the river on the way to school, I didn't stop to think. I just tore off my clothes and jumped, in my knickers, into the freezing water. The boy was panicking. "Stop struggling," I warned, "or I'll have to knock you out." He kept on thrashing, so I bopped him hard. His eyes rolled horribly, but he was no more trouble. So slowly I hauled him back to the bank and dragged him out. A woman flew out of the bushes. "My son!" she cried. "My own dear son, how cold and wet you are!" She scooped him up and ran off towards a little house some way along the river. I wondered whether to go after her, but then the school bell rang. 5 to 9. Quickly, I pulled on my clothes and ran. My knickers are still wet, but otherwise I'm fine. Just happy to have saved a life, and happy I wasn't late. Good story, I thought, and it just fitted neatly on the page. So how was I to know it was going to cause so much trouble? How was I to know Miss Hardy would look round the classroom the very next morning and then pick on Jennifer? Remember those stories I asked you all to write yesterday? Jennifer, why don't you read us yours? Jennifer looked anxious. "I didn't really get started," she admitted. Miss Hardy looked so cross that I thought I'd better come to Jennifer's rescue. "She was too busy writing in her diary," I explained. "Right then," Miss Hardy said cheerfully. "Why don't you read us some of that instead?" Jennifer picked it up and flicked through the first few pages. "There isn't really much in it." Miss Hardy was getting cross again now. "Well, read it anyway," she snapped. So Jennifer began to read. Jan 1st, it was quite cold today. Jan 4th, Mum and I went to the shops. Her voice trailed off. She turned the next few pages rather hopelessly, waiting for Miss Hardy's explosion. And then, suddenly, like manna from heaven, she came across my bit. "Help! Help! The words still ring in my ears." I thought she read the story out rather well, considering it came as such a surprise. I couldn't understand why she got so ratty after. Everyone was crowding round her, telling her how brave she was, and how exciting it must have been, and how rude the boy's mother was not to come back and say thank you to the person who had just saved her poor son from a watery grave. And all Jennifer could do was hiss at me tearfully. "How could you, Iolanthe? Wet knickers! I've never had wet knickers in my life!" Chapter 4. We made up later that morning. We had to, because Miss Hardy got so fed up with the noise, she made everybody in the class settle down and write a story called Time Travel. Jennifer was stuck, and I needed to borrow her second-best ballpoint. "I'll only lend it to you if you share your idea with me." "I'll only share my idea with you if you stop being mad at me." "All right." "All right." So I shared my idea with her. It was brilliant. Pretend we have to come back to school in 50 years' time for open day. Just write down what you think this place will be like by the time you and I are about 60. She stared at me admiringly. "You're so clever, Iolanthe." "Yes, I am," I said, but she didn't look shocked like she usually does when I say that, because she'd already started. I read it over her shoulder. It was really dull, all about how much taller the trees had grown, and how the entrance hall was painted blue now, not green, and how all the pupils had tiny computers built into their desks, and the teachers took them on rocket trips to the moon instead of bus rides to the museum. "Stop reading over my shoulder," she complained. "Get on with your own work." So I did. "It hardly seems over half a century since I was last here," I wrote. "Personally, I still feel and look like the vibrant and beautiful young girl I was then. But the rust on the old school gates is something shocking. And golly, there's been some litter dropped in 60 years. I had to wade through lolly wrappers to reach the front door. And what a shock greeted me there. Miss Hardy, far too old to teach, poor dear, almost fell off her Zimmer frame trying to open the door to me. Her hair was snowy white. The veins on her hands looked like tree roots. Her ill-fitting false teeth clacked horribly as she spoke. "Who is it?" She peered at me blindly, then, "Is it? Can it be?" "Yes!" she cried in her cracked and quavering old voice. "It's Iolanthe Jones! Come in, my dear. How lovely to see you. You were always my favourite pupil." I smiled my usual modest smile as Miss Hardy's lined face suddenly became even more wrinkled. "Now who was that little girl who used to sit next to you, Iolanthe? That poor, pathetic creature who could never think of any—" Sensing danger, I looked up. Jennifer was watching me very closely indeed. "Names for her pet kittens," I wrote hastily. I thought I'd be safe with that. Jennifer's allergic to fur. But no, she went straight into a giant sulk. "You're horrible, Iolanthe," she said. "You're so mean that I'm phoning my mum to tell her not to bother to come and pick me up at lunchtime, because I won't need to go shopping for a new frock, because I'm not coming to your party." "You can't phone her. The phone's broken. And I wasn't being mean. I wasn't writing about you. I was writing about a person I haven't even sat by yet. That's what time travel's all about." I don't know if she believed me. I know she didn't try to phone. But then again, I didn't really expect her to, because if there's one thing that Jennifer absolutely loves, it's a party. Even one of mine. Chapter 5. It was her own fault for getting back so late. If she'd been here, I'd been able to do the same as everyone else and work in a pair. But since I was a leftover, Miss Hardy said firmly, "Do something useful while you're waiting, Iolanthe." So I wrote in the diary. I wrote in the diary because no one else was using it. All Jennifer had written was, "Jan 13th, the sky's a bit pink today." I started on January 14th. "No, not pink. Never pink." "Please, Mother," I begged. "Oh, let me buy a pink frock to go to Iolanthe's party." My mother shrieked in horror. "No, never pink. Not after what happened to your great-aunt Lucy." "What happened to great-aunt Lucy?" "It's too terrible to tell." I begged, I pleaded, I even wept, and finally my mother told me. "Your great-aunt Lucy knew that we had a ghost. Dozens of people had seen the child in pink. She floated in and out of walls, and groaned at midnight, and on the stormiest night her sobs were heard in the nursery. Everyone knew her story. She was a disobedient child. Her mother had told her 100 times, "Stay away from the nasty dark cellars." But would she listen? No. She wandered in and out, and one day she got lost and disappeared. What did they do? They searched, of course, high and low, calling her name, but by the time they found her, she was dead. Quite dead. Quite dead? Well, not quite dead, because from that day on she haunted them, in and out of walls, groaning and sobbing, until the day your great-aunt Lucy wore pink to go to a party. Lucy put on her frock, and then, with half an hour to spare, she wandered off down to the cellars. No. Yes, and just like the child in pink, she wandered in and out of cold, dark places. Some say she saw a child her own age beckoning, and others say she heard a sweet little voice. "Don't go to that party, come to mine." All that we know is that your great-aunt Lucy was never seen alive again, and now, on stormy nights, instead of sobbing, we hear peals of laughter. At midnight, instead of groans, we hear 2 sweet voices singing, and instead of seeing one child in pink float through the walls, people see 2, hand in hand, and people say... Jennifer came rushing back in then, all red-faced, holding a great big carrier bag. "You're terribly late," Miss Hardy scolded her. "The bell rang a long time ago." "Mum says she's sorry, and it will never happen again," Jennifer panted. "It's just that I had to get a frock for Iolanthe's party. The traffic both ways was frightful, and it took us forever to find something the right colour." She fell in her seat, still panting. "Which colour's that, then?" I asked. "Pink," Jennifer said proudly. Just as proudly, I pointed to the first line of my story. "No, not pink, never pink." Jennifer snatched her diary and read through what I'd written. She was so cross again, she wouldn't speak to me the whole afternoon. And I think she only came to my party because her mother made her. She wore blue. Chapter 6. I wanted the diary so much. "Please," I begged Jennifer, "it's wasted on someone like you. You hardly use it. Please give it to me." "What will you give me for it?" I lifted up my desk lid. "Nothing," I said sadly. "There's nothing in here anyone would want." Jennifer shrugged. "I'll just keep it for now, then." "But you don't write anything in it." "That's because nothing happens." "No, it's not." She let me fill in the empty pages, though, the back ones she hadn't used. So on the January 2nd page, I wrote a horror story about a trumpet that could call freshly dead people out of their graves. On the January 3rd page, I made a list of all my unspoken fears, in code. Mind your own business. 2 pages later, I wrote a poem called Stamping on Granny's Daisies. She wanted it back then, so I let her have it, but she couldn't think of anything to write. On the January 6th page, I put down my private worries in strict alphabetical order. Mind your own business again. On the blank page of January 8th, I started on a list of secret hopes, but there was only one, that Jennifer would give me the diary. So I gave up and started another ghost tale. And it was as well I hadn't used up the space, because the story got so complicated it went on through blank pages January 9th and 10th, and even then I had to finish it in tiny writing, so as not to get tangled in help, help on the 11th. On the January 12th page, I wrote a letter begging for the diary. Dear, sweet and lovely Jennifer, all of my life I have longed for a diary like this one, to write all my ideas and thoughts in. It's kind of you to lend it when I ask, but borrowing's not like having. This diary and I were made for one another. We shouldn't be parted for a single hour. And I kept on, for the whole page, with Jennifer pretending she wasn't reading it over my shoulder. "What now?" I asked her. "I've run out of room until tomorrow." "Maybe I'll use up tomorrow's page myself." "I doubt it." "I might," she snapped. I didn't want to argue. I was still hoping she would give it to me. So I went back and filled in all her old half-used days. I stared at her January 1st. It was quite cold today, and then picked up my pen. But not cold enough to stop noble and kind Iolanthe taking soup to the poor. From my window I watched her pick her way over snow and ice to old Mrs Morris's hovel. Inside that rude hut lie 16 shivering children, all half-starved. If it weren't for dear Iolanthe— Miss Hardy interrupted me in mid-flow. "Iolanthe, come up to my desk, please. I want a little word with you." You couldn't really call what she had with me a little word. It was more like a giant great lecture, all about pushing my luck and going too far, and the point at which imagination shades into simple rudeness. I had to say sorry about 1,000,000 times, and then stick clean white paper over most of my time travel story and write in something else over the top. It took a lot of time, so it wasn't till the next day that I got round to filling in Jennifer's mostly empty January 4th. Mum and I went to the shops. "Quick," she said. "Stuff this up your pinny, Jennifer, and I'll hide this in my bag." "Mother," I said, "you mustn't shoplift. It's quite wrong." Her face cracked into an evil scowl. "I'm not your mother," she cried. "It's time you knew, Jennifer. There was a mix-up at the hospital when you were born. This high-born lady and myself were sharing a room. The cots lay side by side, and in the middle of the night—" I broke off. I had to. Jennifer was stabbing me with her pen. "Stop it," she ordered. "Stop it!" Normally I'd have argued, but I'd been in such trouble already that week that I just shrugged and moved on to her January 7th. Nothing much happened today. After the spaceship landed and all the blobmen had blobbed down the ladder into the woods. "Iolanthe?" "Yes, Miss Hardy." "That's not your workbook you're writing in, is it?" "No, Miss Hardy, it's Jennifer's diary." "Give it back." Does no one want me to be happy? No one at all? I sulked for the rest of the day. I tried to tell myself that pretty rainbow-coloured books don't matter. It's the stories that count. But I wanted Jennifer's diary so much. If I could get her to give it to me for keeps, I could start off from January 15th. That would mean 350 pages left. All blank and gleaming and glossy, and all mine. What I needed was something to trade, but I had nothing Jennifer might want. My desk was full of rubbish. Most of the stuff I have at home has to be shared with my sister, and I owe pocket money for 100 years. But curly hair, curly thoughts, says my granny. Let's hope she's right. Chapter 7. The very next morning, I opened Jennifer's diary to January 15th. "Don't you start writing on today's page," she told me. "I might want to use it myself later. See how this sharing isn't working out?" I flicked back to the last only slightly used page. January 13th. The sky's a bit pink today. I gazed at it, chewing my pen and screwing up my face. I drummed my fingers on the desk. I rolled my eyes. "What's the matter?" asked Jennifer. "I can't think of anything to write," I told her. Jennifer stared. "What? You?" "Yes," I said snappily. "Me." Jennifer looked anxious. "Are you ill, Iolanthe?" "No, I'm not ill." "Then what's happened?" "Nothing's happened," I told her. "It's just that I don't seem to have any ideas." "That's strange. For you." "Yes, isn't it?" We stared at it together for a while. The sky's a bit pink today. Then Jennifer said guiltily, "Maybe it's my fault. I was the one who wrote it after all, and it is a bit boring." "Bit boring? The sky's a bit pink today is start me off with a yawn," but I was too canny to say so. "Not at all, and anyhow, I ought to be able to think of something." We both stared some more. I felt it was important to keep her attention, so... "Suppose," I said hesitantly. Then, shaking my head, "No, forget it." That set her off. "What about..." As usual, she stopped. "No, that's no good." It's not my style, but I was getting in the swing of it. "What if..." I broke off. "No, that's stupid." Encouraged, she tried again herself. "Could you..." Sadly, she brushed the idea aside. "No, that's hopeless too." I turned to look at her with wide, sincere eyes. "Jennifer," I said, "I want to tell you I'm sorry. I've been a brute, a horrid, impatient brute. I never thought how awful it must feel to be a person who has no ideas. I promise I'll never again tease you or get crabby when you can't think of anything to write." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," I said. "In fact, I almost feel that if I ever had 2 ideas in future and you had none, I'd give you one of mine." She turned to look at me closely. "You almost think that?" "Yes, almost." She picked up the diary and gazed at it thoughtfully. "Do you think having this might just push you over?" "Push me over?" "From almost to definitely?" "Yes, it might." I laid a finger on it and shut my eyes. "In fact, I have a feeling it might even help me get my ideas back." She shoved it into my hand. "Here, take it, it's yours." "Really? For keeps?" "For keeps." I held it tightly and stared into space. "I think it's working," I said hopefully. Yes, I believe it's working. In fact, at this very moment, I feel an idea welling up." "2," Jennifer said firmly. "Yes, 2 ideas," I agreed hastily. "One for me, one for you." "That's better," she said tartly. "I'm keeping hers, of course, until she needs it. I've started off on mine. The sky's a bit pink today. Ever since Venus exploded and shattered Mars, the colours have been startling. The few of us who weren't blinded by the flashes sit by the fire. And it's a good idea. But pretending I'd run out of ideas was even better. I can't write that one in the diary, though. Jennifer might see. The worst child I ever had. Chapter 1. Under a Leafy Tree. 3 babysitters sat round the sandpit under a leafy tree. Mrs Mackle had Mark. He was asleep in his pram, so he was no trouble. Jeff had the twins, Josh and Jessie. They kept bashing one another with their little wooden spades and trying to feed each other things they found in the sand. Dead insects, bits of grass, old sweetie wrappers. But they weren't much trouble. Flora had Francis. Francis kept charging off out of sight in the bushes, and Flora had to keep running off to fetch her back. Francis was more trouble than all the other 3 put together. "Worst child I ever had," said Jeff, "was a sniffer. Sniffed all the time. Sniff, sniff, sniff. Little pause, then sniff. I tell you, this child nearly drove me mad." He darted forward to take a broken end of lolly stick away from Jessie. "Worst child I ever had," said Flora, "was a fusser. Such a fusser. Fussed if it wasn't the right cup, fussed if there weren't the right gloves, fussed if you made the sandwich wrong or cut it the wrong way. That child was a real pain." She rushed off to fetch Francis out of the bushes. Mrs. Mackle put out a hand to rock Mark in his pram, while she waited for Flora to come back. As soon as Flora was sitting comfortably on the bench again, Mrs. Mackle said, "I've babysat for some horrible children in my time. I had one who tried to strangle the cat, and one who screamed if you tried to make her put on her welly boots. I've had dozens who wouldn't go to bed at the right time. And I've had sneaky ones, children who were perfectly happy sitting in your lap reading books and doing jigsaws, but as soon as they hear their parents coming home, they start to wail and howl and act as if you'd spent the entire evening beating them." "Now that is sneaky," said Flora, rushing off to fetch Francis. "Terrible," agreed Jeff, taking a lump of something nasty off Josh. Mrs. Mackle rocked the pram and waited for Flora to get back. Then she told them, "But the worst child I ever had lived in one of those houses over there." She pointed over the park. "See the red house?" she said. "The one with white windows, 25 Redlands Road. That's where she lived, the worst child I ever had." Overhead in the tree, a few leaves stirred. Mrs. Mackle sighed. "This was a long time ago," she said. 3 whole years. This child was very young then. She would be older now." "Tell us about her," said Flora, running off to fetch Francis. "Yes, tell us," said Jeff, flicking a bit of twig out of Jess's mouth. Mrs. Mackle rocked the pram till Flora came back again. Then, "It's a horrible story," she said. "It makes me shiver even to think about it. You're sure you want to hear it?" "Definitely," said Jeff. "Oh, please," said Flora. "All right then," said Mrs. Mackle. "I'll tell you." She leaned forward and whispered so softly that only Flora, Jeff, and the leafy tree could hear. "Her name was Susan Solly," she began. Up in the tree, young Susan Solly, of 25 Redlands Road, hugged herself happily and smiled. Chapter 2. Snail City. "She was a pretty little thing," said Mrs. Mackle. "She was a peaceful baby. She grew into a merry toddler, and then into a cheerful little girl. Everyone round here loved babysitting for her. She ate all her supper, and cleaned her teeth without making a big fuss, and went to bed when she was told, just like a perfect angel." "She sounds wonderful," said Flora, rushing off to fetch Francis. "I wouldn't have minded looking after her," agreed Jeff, taking Jess's spade away because she was bashing Josh too hard. "Wait till you hear," said Mrs. Mackle darkly. She rocked the pram till Flora came back again. Then she carried on. Susan Solly liked painting and doing jigsaws and watching the telly and cutting up magazines and sticking pictures with glue. She liked her woodwork set and she liked helping to cook. But most of all, she liked playing in the garden. Jeff looked over the park towards 25 Redlands Road. "It's a good garden," he said. "Bushes and grass. Is that an apple tree by the fence?" "Yes," Mrs. Mackle said. "That's where she liked to play. Under the apple tree, there is a wheelbarrow upside down in the long grass, next to the compost heap. The family throw all their tea leaves and apple cores and carrot peelings and shriveled up bits of lettuce onto the compost heap. And once a week, Susan's mother waters it down with the hose to make it rot faster." "Nice place to play," sniffed Flora. "Get a bit messy," agreed Jeff. "She didn't play in it," said Mrs. Mackle, "or on it. She played beside it, in the long grass. She liked it there because there was an old log and mossy stones and lots of snails." "Snails? Snails?" "Yes, snails," said Mrs. Mackle. "Dozens and dozens of them. Snails love damp places, you see, and they love bits of old salad. So you ask, your average common or garden snail his opinion, and he'll tell you that a mossy stone, next to a log, beside an upturned wheelbarrow, under an apple tree in the long grass close to a compost heap, is about the best place in the world to live. Positively palatial. Fancy, said Flora, rushing off to fetch Francis. I didn't realise, said Jeff, wiping something rather peculiar and green off Josh's nose. Few people do, said Mrs Mackle. I never knew much about snails till I babysat for Susan Solly, but she spent hours and hours playing with these snails. Playing with them? Said Flora, who had come back. Yes, Mrs Mackle said, playing. She ran snail parties, and snail schools, and snail feasts, and snail races. She made snail patterns, though they got restless and they always moved. And if it was dry enough, Susan brought out her paint box and painted the snails' shells the most beautiful colours in her snail beauty shop. Mrs Mackle smiled. It was a regular snail city next to that compost heap. The other two were astonished. Didn't she hurt them? Asked Flora. Never, said Mrs Mackle firmly. Not once. She was as gentle as I am with a baby. To prove it, she gave Mark a little rock in his pram. She picked them up carefully and put them back after a very short while. She always let them glide off if they seemed bothered. She wouldn't even run a little zoo in her snail city because she loved them so much she couldn't bear to think of them trapped in anything. No, fair's fair. You have to give young Susan Solly her due. She was a perfect angel with the snails. What was the problem then? Asked Flora. Yes, Jeff agreed. How did this perfect angel turn out to be the worst child you ever had? Wait till you hear, said Mrs Mackle darkly. Up in the leafy tree, Susan Solly smiled. Chapter 3. Doing what she was told. One day, said Mrs Mackle, I went off to babysit for Susan Solly. It started to drizzle as I walked up her garden path, and it kept on all morning. Nice today, though, said Flora, rushing off to fetch Francis. Better than yesterday, agreed Jeff, waiting for Flora to come back so they could get on with the story. He spent the time shaking some of the sand out of Jess's nappy. Flora rushed back and sat down. Go on, she said to Mrs Mackle. Mrs Mackle went on. Susan, of course, had gone out to play with the snails. I could see her through the window. First she fixed up a snail snack, offering them some juicy fresh titbits she found on the very top of the compost heap. Then she organised a great snail expedition through the wet grass and over the mossy boulders. I think they were supposed to be heading for the rose bush, but a lot of them kept straying. It must have been a very slow expedition, said Jeff. It certainly was, and while it was taking place, the drizzle turned into raindrops, and the raindrops turned into a downpour. Susan was in her raincoat and hat and boots, but by the middle of the morning she looked soaking wet. I would have called her inside, said Flora, rushing off to fetch Francis. So would I, agreed Jeff, rescuing a ladybird Josh was trying to pat with his spade. I tried, said Mrs Mackle. I did try. I opened the window and leaned out. You'd better come in now, Susan, I told her. Susan, did you hear me? I asked. I don't want to have to tell you again, dear, I said. Come in and we'll watch cartoons. Snail Show is on telly next, and you know it's your favourite, I wheedled. If you don't come in, I shall have to tell your mother, I threatened. Susan, come in right now, I ordered. Susan, I yelled. If you don't come in right this minute, I shall come out there and drag you in, I shrieked. Susan, get in this house right now, I bellowed, and I slammed the window shut so hard I broke a pane. The other two stared. Jeff's mouth had dropped open. Flora looked aghast. Jeff said, "What happened?" Mrs Mackle said, "Would you believe it? After all that time pretending she had cloth ears, that cheeky little madam suddenly gave a secret little smile, whispered something to the snails, then stood up and walked calm as you please towards the house." "Doing what she was told at last," said Flora. She sounded quite relieved. "Wait till you hear," warned Mrs Mackle darkly. Up in the tree, young Susan Solly gave yet another little secret smile and hugged herself again. Chapter 4. Snail Show. Flora rushed off to fetch Frances. When she came back, she said to Mrs Mackle, "I don't think I would have sat and watched Snail Show cartoons with Susan Solly after all that." "Neither would I," agreed Jeff, prizing Josh and Jessie apart because they were trying to bite one another. "I'd have been far too cross." "I was too," said Mrs Mackle. "I went straight into the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. I didn't even offer Susan orange juice, and she didn't come in and ask for it. She just kept marching back and forth from her toy cupboard under the stairs to the front room, carrying armfuls of tiny plastic chairs from her doll's house." "A nice change," said Flora, "playing with stuff from her doll's house." Mrs Mackle snorted. "Wait till you hear," Jeff warned Flora, to save Mrs Mackle the bother of saying it darkly. Then he turned to Mrs Mackle. "Carry on." She carried on. "I sat at the table in the kitchen, sipping my coffee and nibbling a nice digestive biscuit. After a while, I heard Susan switch on the television in the front room." "Was it Snail Show cartoons?" asked Flora, as she rushed off to fetch Frances. "Yes," Mrs Mackle told her when she came back. "I recognised the silly song they always sing." "And did Susan sit and watch it all by herself?" asked Jeff, prizing Josh and Jessie apart because they were trying to poke one another's eyes out. "I thought she did," said Mrs Mackle. "That's what I thought at first. But then, in between sips of coffee and nibbles of biscuit, I thought I heard the back door quietly open and quietly close, and open and close, and open and close." "How strange," said Flora. "Very odd," agreed Jeff. "Just what I thought," said Mrs Mackle. "So I called out, 'Susan, are you all right, dear?' And she called back, 'Yes, thank you, Mrs Mackle.'" "She sounds like a perfect angel," Jeff said, wistfully, prizing Josh and Jessie apart because they were trying to pull one another's hair out. "Wait till you hear," warned Flora, to save Mrs Mackle the bother of saying it darkly. Then she rushed off to fetch Frances. When she came back, Mrs Mackle took up the tale. "So I drank up my coffee and finished my biscuit, and just as I was rinsing the cup under the tap, I thought I heard the back door again, open and close." "Weird," Flora said. "Most peculiar," agreed Jeff. "So I thought I'd better go and take a look." "You never know," said Flora. "Better safe than sorry," agreed Jeff. I walked across the kitchen and opened the door. There was nothing in the hall, just the door of the toy cupboard under the stairs swinging open, and Susan's doll's house empty on the floor. Flora looked round for Frances, but, tired suddenly from all that running away into the bushes, Frances had climbed quietly into her pushchair and fallen fast asleep. Jeff glanced in the sandpit. Josh was squashed up as close to Jessie as he could get, sucking his own thumb, but patting Jessie's chubby thigh. Jessie's eyes were drooping. "Go on," whispered Flora. "Yes, go on," whispered Jeff. I walked down the hall and pushed open the door of the front room. At first I saw nothing special, just the same old furniture in the same old places, and on the television, Snail Show cartoons blaring away. To an empty room? Nobody watching. That's what I thought at first. But then I saw. Mrs. Mackle's face drained dead white at the memory. Up in the branches overhead, a few leaves stirred as if a breeze had rippled through the tree. "Saw who?" whispered Flora. "Saw what?" whispered Jeff. Mrs. Mackle leapt to her feet, tearing her hair at the memory. "Dozens of them!" she cried. "Dozens of the horrible, slimy, slithery things, each one perched on its own tiny plastic doll's chair, each one with its little head poked out of its shell and its little horns straining. A whole lot of them, looking for all the world as if they were at a little private cinema watching a show on the big screen. Snail show! Snail show! It was horrible, cried Mrs. Mackle. Horrible, horrible. It was the worst sight that I've ever seen in all my years of babysitting. And if I live to be 100 years old, Susan Solly will always be the worst child I ever had." "There, there," soothed Flora. "Try and calm yourself. It's all over now." "That's right," agreed Jeff. "You said yourself, all this happened a long time ago." He put his arms round the shaking Mrs. Mackle as the leaves of the tree overhead rustled gently, and 6 feet above him, Susan Solly smiled. "Time to go home," Jeff said. "This afternoon seems to have gone very fast. It's almost tea time." Pulling her coat around her shoulders, Mrs. Mackle slipped the brake off the pram. "See you tomorrow," she said, and set off for the north gate. "Cheerio," said Flora, wheeling the pushchair towards the west gate. Jeff strapped the twins into the double buggy. "Bye," he called over his shoulder as he hurried off to the east gate. There was a moment's silence. Then, with a rustle of leaves, young Susan Solly slid easily down the tree trunk and set off, calm as you please, across the park to the south gate and 25 Redlands Road. She was still smiling.
That was The Worst Child I Ever Had by Anne Fine, read by Sophie Ward.